What would you do if everyone called you ordinary while enemy signals screamed through the dark? Sylvie Navarro pushes wire-rimmed glasses up her nose, counts the coffee stains on her desk. 17 today, same as yesterday. The cryptography wing at Blackwood Intelligence hums with urgent whispers. Typewriter bells, the scratch of pencils against impossible equations. She is 23, holds 2 mathematics degrees, speaks 4 languages fluently, but here she files reports, sorts intercepted transmissions, watches the real codebreakers work. Gideon Rowe storms past her cubicle, his uniform crisp metals catching fluorescent light, the kind of man who fills doorways, who commands attention without asking. Behind him trails his team, Royce Trenton, with his Harvard pins. Phoenix Chandler adjusting his tie, voices carrying across the room like trumpets. We cracked the submarine codes, we found the weapons cache, we saved the convoy. Sylvie keeps her head down, fingers tracing the edges of a transmission that came in last night, the pattern that makes her chest tight, the frequency that whispers secrets in a language she almost understands. The morning briefing starts at 0800. Sylvie sits in the back row, notebook open, pen ready. Invisible commander Thea Harmon strides to the podium, her voice cutting through the chatter. Gentlemen, we have a problem. The projection screen flickers, shows a map dotted with red X marks enemy positions, supply lines, communication networks that stretch like spider webs across the continent. For the past 3 weeks, our intercepted signals show increased coordination between enemy cells. They are planning something big, and we cannot let them succeed. Gideon raises his hand, his team already nodding before he speaks. Commander, my unit has experience with coordinated enemy networks. We can handle this. Other hands shoot up, confident voices offering solutions. Algorithms approaches the mathematical equivalent of brute force. Sylvie stares at the frequency patterns on the overhead display, sees something the others miss, a rhythm hidden beneath the chaos like a heartbeat under noise. She raises her hand barely above shoulder height. The room continues buzzing, discussing deployment strategies, resource allocation. Who gets the glory of solving the unsolvable? Commander Harmon glances toward the back, notices the quiet woman in civilian clothes. Sylvie, you have something? All eyes turn, conversations halt mid-sentence. Sylvie feels heat creep up her neck, clears her throat. The pattern, she begins, voice barely above whisper. It is not random. There is a mathematical sequence hidden in the timing intervals. Gideon laughs, sharp, dismissive. Commander, with respect, pattern recognition requires actual field experience, not just theoretical knowledge. Murmurs ripple through the room, agreement, amusement, the kind of sound that makes smart people feel small. Sylvie opens her mouth, closes it again, returns to her notebook, where numbers do not judge, where equations hold truth regardless of who discovers them. Commander Harmon studies the projection, then looks back at Sylvie. You see something specific? Before she can answer, Gideon stands blocking her view. We have senior cryptographers working around the clock on these transmissions. Surely we should trust established protocols, proven methods. The room murmurs approval, heads nodding like synchronized metronomes. Sylvie slides down in her chair, watches through the gap between shoulders as assignments get distributed to the real code breakers, the important people, the ones who matter. After the briefing, she returns to her desk, pulls out the transmission from last night, the one that keeps her awake, with its almost familiar rhythm her fingers trace the signal patterns like reading Braille, seeing what others cannot see, knowing what others refuse to hear. In 2 hours, the senior team will present their preliminary findings, confident, thorough, wrong. But Sylvie sits in her corner with her coffee-stained desk and her quiet mathematics, holding the key to a door no one believes exists. The transmission crackles through her headphones, static and meaning dancing together like lovers in a language only she seems to speak. She pulls out a fresh sheet of paper, begins mapping the signal intervals, 17 seconds between bursts, then 23, then 11, prime numbers hiding in the noise. Her pencil moves faster, sketching frequency curves, plotting amplitude variations, the kind of work that makes her forget lunch, forget time, forget that she is supposed to be filing reports for people who think mathematics is something you leave in textbooks. Down the hall, Gideon's voice booms from the secure conference room where the important decisions happen, where the real war gets fought by the real soldiers. We need more computing power, more personnel, more time to crack these enemy codes through the glass partition. Sylvie can see him gesturing at whiteboards covered in standard decryption models. Approaches that worked in previous conflicts against previous enemies who followed previous patterns. Malachi Shaw nods from the corner, the department supervisor who signs off on budgets and promotions and who gets remembered in the history books. Royce Trenton points to a chart, explains probability matrices, statistical analysis, the kind of methodical approach that looks impressive in presentations but misses the poetry hidden in mathematics. Phoenix Chandler takes notes, dutiful, thorough recording. Every conventional thought, every predictable solution, every reason why this problem requires exactly what they have always done before. Sylvie returns to her frequency map, sees the pattern emerging like a photograph developing in chemical darkness, revealing shapes that were always there waiting for the right eyes to recognize them. She stands, walks to the water cooler, where Zuri Vaughn refills her coffee cup, the night shift analyst, who stays late not from dedication, but from desperation. The hunger that comes from being almost good enough, almost recognized, almost important. You working on the new transmissions? Zuri asks, voice careful, neutral, the tone people use when they suspect they are talking to someone who might matter. Sylvie nods, sips her water, watches through the glass as Gideon draws arrows on his whiteboard, connecting dots that exist only in his imagination. Zuri follows her gaze, smiles, the smile of shared understanding, the recognition that passes between people who know what it means to be overlooked. They think it is about processing power, Zuri says quietly, but some patterns cannot be computed. They have to be felt. Sylvie looks at her, really looks, sees the intelligence hiding behind tired eyes, the kind of mind that works third shift not by choice, but by circumstance. What do you see when you listen to the static? Sylvie asks. Zuri glances around, makes sure no one is watching, leans closer, whispers, music hidden in the mathematics, like someone is trying to sing through the interference. Before Sylvie can respond, Commander Harmon appears, clipboard in hand, scanning the room for productivity, for results, for anything that looks like progress. Ladies, back to work. These codes will not crack themselves. They scatter, return to their desks, their assigned tasks, their proper places in the hierarchy that values volume over insight, credentials over curiosity. Sylvie sits down, puts her headphones back on, listens to the transmission that arrived this morning. Frequency 147. 3 MHz burst, pattern, irregular content, encrypted beyond standard recognition, but underneath the chaos, she hears it, the thing Zuri mentioned, the music in the mathematics, the rhythm that sounds almost like breathing, almost like thinking, almost like someone trying very hard to say something important in a language designed to be impossible to understand. 3 days pass like water through fingers, carrying urgency and unspoken frustration. The enemy transmissions multiply, flooding the intercept stations with patterns that twist through conventional analysis like smoke through nets. Gideon's team works 18-hour shifts, their confidence cracking under the weight of mathematical impossibility, their whiteboards covered in crossed-out equations, abandoned theories, the debris of failed brilliance. Commander Harmon paces the main operations floor, her heels clicking against polished concrete, marking time like a countdown to consequences no one wants to imagine. Sylvie arrives early, stays late, maps the transmissions with the patience of someone who knows that truth reveals itself slowly to those who learn to listen beyond the obvious. Her desk accumulates coffee cups, pencil shavings, sheets of paper covered in frequency curves that look more like musical notation than military intelligence. Zuri stops by during shift change, pretends to deliver reports, but really comes to see the patterns. Sylvie has discovered the mathematical poetry that sings beneath the static. You found something new? Zuri asks, voice barely above whisper, careful not to attract attention from the important people who might mistake curiosity for insubordination. Sylvie points to her latest chart, 17 transmission clusters, each separated by intervals that follow the Fibonacci sequence, hidden so perfectly that conventional analysis treats them as random noise. It is not encryption, Sylvie explains. It is musical composition, mathematical music designed to sound like chaos to anyone who listens with machines instead of minds. Before Zuri can respond, Gideon's voice cuts across the operations floor, sharp with frustration and public humiliation. Commander, we need to discuss resource allocation, perhaps reassign some personnel to more appropriate tasks. His gaze sweeps the room, lands on Sylvie's desk, takes in the scattered papers, the unconventional approach, the evidence of someone working outside established protocol. Some of our junior staff might be better utilized in support roles rather than attempting analysis beyond their experience level. The words hang in the air like smoke from a fired weapon. Everyone understands the target, the intention, the damage. Commander Harmon follows his gaze, sees Sylvie's work, the mathematical drawings that look nothing like the standardized reports she expects from her analysts. Perhaps she says slowly, we should focus resources on proven methodologies. Tested approaches. Senior personnel, with appropriate credentials. Sylvie feels the room shift. Conversations halt. Eyes turn toward her corner, where she sits with her civilian clothes, her wire-rimmed glasses, her mathematics degree from a university. No one in this room has heard of Royce Trenton. Speaks up, voice carrying the authority of Ivy League confidence. Commander, signal analysis requires systematic approaches, not creative interpretation. These patterns need computational analysis, not artistic speculation. Phoenix. Chandler nods agreement, adds his own observation about the importance of following established procedures, maintaining professional standards, ensuring that critical intelligence stays in qualified hands. Sylvie stares at her papers, watches the mathematical truth transform into liability, the evidence of insight become proof of inadequacy in a world that measures competence by volume rather than accuracy. Malachi Shaw steps forward, clipboard in hand, expression neutral, but eyes calculating the political mathematics of institutional hierarchy. Perhaps, he suggests, MS. Navarro would benefit from additional training before taking on projects of this sensitivity level. The suggestion lands soft, sounds reasonable, feels like concern, but cuts deep as intended. Sylvie gathers her papers, slides them into folders away from curious eyes that see only disorder, where she sees revelation, only speculation, where she hears certainty. She stands, walks to the filing cabinet, where she pretends to organize meaningless reports while listening to discussions about computational resources, additional personnel, timeline extensions, everything except the mathematical music playing beneath their feet. Before we continue, comment where you are watching from, because what happens next depends on whether anyone is truly listening. During lunch break, Sylvie sits alone in the corner cafeteria table where the light filters through frosted windows, and she can spread her work without interference. The transmission from This Morning crackles through her headphones. 17 bursts followed by silence, then 23 more, the pattern continuing like a mathematical conversation between minds that understand the difference between complexity and chaos. She pulls out her grandmother's compass, the brass instrument that guided her through geometry classes, engineering projects, every mathematical journey that brought her here to this moment where discovery feels dangerous. The compass spins, finds magnetic north points toward truth with the reliability of natural law, unlike human judgment, which bends under pressure, breaks under scrutiny, fails when it matters most. Footsteps approach, measured, purposeful, the sound of authority checking on subordinates. Commander Harmon appears, slides into the seat across from Sylvie's scattered papers, studies the frequency charts with eyes that see tactical implications rather than mathematical beauty. These patterns, she says finally, what do they mean operationally speaking? Sylvie looks up, meets her commander's gaze, sees something unexpected. Curiosity mixed with concern, the expression of someone who wants to believe that unconventional thinking might save conventional lives. They are coordinates, Sylvie says quietly, not for places, but for moments, timing sequences that tell us exactly when the enemy will move. Commander Harmon leans forward, studies the mathematical notation that covers every sheet, sees order where others see chaos, recognizes intelligence where others see inexperience. How certain are you? Sylvie touches her grandmother's compass, feels the weight of certainty that comes from mathematical truth rather than institutional approval, certain enough to stake everything on being right. Commander Harmon stares at the compass, brass worn smooth by decades of faithful hands, seeking direction in mathematical uncertainty. What is this? She asks, voice softer, now curious rather than commanding. My grandmother, Sylvie answers. She was a navigator during the last war, guided ships through minefields using stars and mathematics. When instruments failed, when conventional wisdom led only to destruction, the compass spin settles on magnetic north, unwavering despite the chaos surrounding them, the institutional pressure that bends lesser truths into acceptable lies. Before Commander Harmon can respond, Gideon appears, flanked by his entire team. Royce, with his Harvard confidence, Phoenix, adjusting his tie like armor before battle. Commander, we have updates on the decryption progress. His eyes scan Sylvie's papers, dismissive but alert, the way predators assess potential threats to their territory, their status, their carefully constructed reputation. What is this meeting? He asks, voice carrying the weight of someone accustomed to being included in every decision that matters. Commander Harmon gathers Sylvie's frequency charts, protective gesture that does not go unnoticed. MS. Navarro has presented some interesting observations about the transmission patterns. Gideon laughs sharp sound that cuts through cafeteria. Quiet draws attention from nearby tables where other analysts sit watching the drama unfold like spectators. At an execution commander with respect, interesting observations are not actionable intelligence. We cannot base operational decisions on amateur pattern recognition. Royce steps forward, adds his Harvard-trained voice to the institutional chorus. These transmissions require systematic cryptographic analysis, not creative interpretation from personnel. Without appropriate security clearance for this level of material, the words land like accusations, painting Sylvie as liability rather than asset. Someone who cannot be trusted with secrets that matter, decisions that save lives. Sylvie feels the familiar weight of being measured by credentials rather than capability, judged by position rather than perception, dismissed before her ideas get fair consideration. Phoenix pulls out his tablet, displays their progress report. Charts and graphs that look impressive mean nothing, solve nothing, but satisfy the bureaucratic need for visible effort, measurable failure. We have identified 17 possible cipher keys, tested 14 encryption protocols, allocated 47 man-hours to statistical analysis. Commander Harmon studies their data, sees the careful documentation of systematic approaches that produce systematic results. Predictable progress toward predictable dead ends. What about the timing intervals? She asks, looking at Sylvie's charts where prime numbers dance through mathematical space, like poetry written in the language of war. Gideon waves dismissively. Timing analysis is secondary to frequency decryption. We must crack the message content before worrying about transmission schedules. But Sylvie knows timing is everything, the difference between intercepting enemy plans and arriving too late to prevent disaster. She stands, voice barely above whisper, but carrying the weight of mathematical certainty. The content does not matter if we miss the moment when it becomes reality. Silence stretches across the cafeteria. Conversations halt as everyone waits for the institutional response to unconventional truth. Malachi Shaw materializes like bureaucracy made flesh, clipboard in hand, policies at his fingertips, procedures that protect organizations from individuals who think beyond established boundaries. MS Navarro, perhaps we should discuss your current assignments. Ensure you are focusing on appropriate tasks within your skill level. The threat hangs unspoken, but clear to everyone. Step back into your place, accept your limitations, or face consequences that end careers, destroy futures. Silence voices that speak uncomfortable truths. Sylvie looks around the room, sees Zuri watching from behind her coffee cup, eyes wide with recognition of what happens to people who challenge the comfortable certainty of those in charge. She sees other junior analysts, heads down, pretending not to notice the systematic dismissal of someone like them, someone whose crime is seeing patterns that expose the blindness of conventional wisdom. Commander Harmon stands, decision crystallizing in her expression, the choice between supporting established order and risking everything on mathematical intuition from someone the system considers expendable. MS Navarro, report to my office at 1400 hours. We need to discuss your future assignments. The words sound neutral, administrative routine, but everyone understands the subtext, the institutional machinery grinding into motion to protect itself from inconvenient truth. Gideon smiles, satisfaction evident, problem solved, threat neutralized, order restored to the natural hierarchy, where senior personnel make important decisions and junior staff follow orders without question. Sylvie gathers her papers, slides the compass into her pocket, feels its weight against her palm. Solid reminder that magnetic north remains constant regardless of human politics, institutional pressure, or the comfortable lies people tell themselves when truth becomes too dangerous to acknowledge. She walks toward the door, past tables full of analysts who avoid eye contact, protect themselves through strategic blindness, the survival instinct that keeps careers intact. Consciences quiet and enemy transmissions undecoded, but in her pocket the compass spins, finds direction through mathematical certainty toward a confrontation that will determine whether institutional pride or mathematical truth guides them through the darkness ahead. At her desk, Sylvie opens the morning transmission, puts on her headphones, listens to the frequency that no one else believes matters, the mathematical music that plays the countdown to disaster, while the important people argue about procedures, protocols, and the proper way to fail with dignity. The pattern emerges clearer, now 17 hours until the enemy moves 23 minutes for the window of opportunity, 11 seconds to choose between comfortable silence and dangerous truth. She picks up her pencil, begins calculating the precise moment when mathematics will collide with politics, and someone will discover whether courage can overcome institutional blindness, or if some frequencies are destined to remain forever unheard. 1400 hours arrives like Judgment Day measured in heartbeats and institutional consequences. Sylvie stands outside Commander Harmon's office, watching through frosted glass as shadows move like pieces on a chessboard, where she is the expendable pawn about to be sacrificed for strategic stability. Door opens, Commander Harmon emerges, followed by Malachi Shaw, clipboard thick with policies, procedures designed to protect organizations from individuals who see too clearly, think too independently, threaten too directly the comfortable certainties that keep hierarchies intact. MS. Navarro, please come in. The office smells of coffee, stale cigarettes, and the particular desperation that accompanies impossible decisions made by people who know they are choosing between right and wrong, but cannot afford to choose right. Sit down. Sylvie takes the chair facing the desk where her grandmother's compass sits, beside official documents, transfer orders, reassignment papers, the bureaucratic machinery of institutional self-preservation. Commander Harmon studies her with eyes that have seen too many wars, made too many compromises, watched too many good people disappear into administrative silence because truth became inconvenient. Your work is impressive, mathematically speaking, but this department requires team-oriented approaches, collaborative solutions, consensus building among established personnel. The words sound reasonable, mask the underlying message that independent thinking threatens group dynamics, that insight without approval becomes insubordination, that being right in the wrong way counts as being wrong. Malachi Shaw opens his clipboard, begins reading from documents that reduce human complexity to administrative categories, performance reviews that measure conformity rather than competence, collaboration scores that reward agreement over accuracy. We have discussed your future assignments, positions that better match your current skill level, administrative support, data entry, filing responsibilities where you can contribute without overreaching your established parameters. Sylvie listens to her career being systematically dismantled, her mathematical insights transformed into liabilities, her pattern recognition redefined as insubordination, her discovery potential sacrificed for institutional comfort. She touches the compass, feels its steady weight, remembers her grandmother's stories about navigating through darkness when conventional instruments failed, when following established routes led only to disaster and mathematical truth became the only reliable guide through chaos. Commander, she says quietly, voice carrying the weight of mathematical certainty, the enemy will move in 13 hours, coordinated attacks across 17 positions, the timing encoded in transmission frequencies that your senior team cannot decode because they are listening for the wrong language. Silence fills the office, thick with implications that extend beyond career consequences into operational reality, where being wrong costs lives and being right saves them. Commander Harmon leans forward, studies Sylvie's face, searching for the confidence that comes from knowledge rather than speculation, the certainty that distinguishes mathematical truth from wishful thinking. How do you know this? Because mathematics does not lie, does not politic, does not protect feelings or institutional pride. It simply reveals what exists beneath the surface of comfortable assumptions. Sylvie pulls out her latest chart, frequency analysis that maps enemy transmissions like musical notation, where timing intervals create the melody and amplitude variations provide the rhythm of coordinated military action. This is their countdown. She explains 17 transmission clusters, marking positions, 23-minute intervals, marking timing, 11-second bursts, marking final coordination, a mathematical symphony conducted by someone who understands that the best encryption hides in plain sight, disguised as randomness. Commander Harmon examines the chart, sees patterns that connect across geographic distances, temporal coordinates that align with strategic positions, vulnerable installations, supply routes, communication networks, the entire infrastructure of defensive preparation. Malachi Shaw shifts uncomfortably, realizes that administrative solutions cannot address mathematical realities, that policy cannot override physics, and institutional hierarchy becomes irrelevant when enemy action creates its own timeline independent of bureaucratic procedures. If You are right, Commander Harmon says slowly. We need to alert all defensive positions, coordinate countermeasures, mobilize response teams based on your calculations. If you are wrong, careers and resources get wasted, institutional credibility suffers. Damage that takes years to repair, and the comfortable certainty of established procedures gets questioned by people who prefer mathematical truth to administrative comfort. Sylvie stands, pulls the compass from her pocket, sets it on the desk where it spins briefly, then settles on magnetic north, unwavering despite the institutional turbulence surrounding them. My grandmother used this to guide ships through minefields during the last war, when conventional navigation led to destruction, and mathematical precision meant the difference between survival and catastrophe. She saved 17 convoys using frequency analysis and mathematical intuition rather than standard protocols, because sometimes the right answer comes from thinking differently, not thinking more of the same thoughts. Commander Harmon picks up the compass, feels its weight, recognizes the tool of someone who navigated through actual danger rather than bureaucratic obstacle courses, who chose mathematical truth over institutional approval and lived with consequences that measured success in lives saved rather than policies followed. The intercom crackles, urgent voice breaking through. Office, quiet. Commander, priority transmission, incoming enemy activity detected across multiple sectors, coordinated movement beginning now. Sylvie checks her watch, 17 hours and 37 minutes since her calculation, enemy action beginning exactly when mathematics predicted, proving that truth operates independently of institutional approval. Commander Harmon looks at the compass, then at Sylvie, then at Malachi Shaw, who suddenly understands that administrative procedures cannot stop enemy attacks, and mathematical precision matters more than career protection. Alert all stations, she orders, implement defensive protocols based on MS Navarro's frequency analysis, coordinate response teams according to her timing calculations, and someone get me a direct line to headquarters. Malachi Shaw opens his clipboard, then closes it, realizes that this moment transcends policy, enters territory where competence matters more than credentials, and mathematical truth overrides institutional comfort. Sylvie picks up her grandmother's compass, feels magnetic north pulling her toward the operations center, where enemy frequencies wait to be decoded by someone who understands that the most important patterns often sound like chaos to ears trained on conventional wisdom. The real work begins now in the space between mathematical certainty and human consequence, where pattern recognition becomes life preservation, and quiet. Women in civilian clothes discover that truth has its own frequency that cuts through institutional static, reaches the people who need to hear it most, and changes everything. If this story moved you, like, share, and subscribe.